So, Shannon, what was your biggest takeaway from what you saw from these episodes?
Jenny, I was listening very intently, and I made sure there was a calm all over the land. As a matter of fact, I went outside, and I said, I don't want to hear a word. I don't want to hear nothing, no horns, no nothing, because I wanted to make sure I was hearing what I heard. You mean to tell me Michael Jordan needed teammates? That Phil Jackson had to instruct in Game 5, the clinching game. He comes to the sideline, and he's talking. Michael, who's open? John, well, get him the ball. And he started passing John Paxson the ball. What? He started making the right play. Instead of him trying to go one-on-one like everybody instructs. Because I've heard this, Jenny, and I know you've heard it since you was a little bitty girl. Michael Jordan would have took that shot. Michael Jordan would have took the game over. But if you notice, when he was a solo act, he wasn't jack. It wasn't until he started getting Scottie Pippen involved, John Paxson involved. Did you know John Paxson, Skip, he was 9 or 12 in that Game 5, had 20 points. Because, Skip Bayless, when LeBron James makes the right play, they miss. Oh, you got to take that shot. But see, Skip, I've been telling you this, and I tell everybody this. You make the right play, and you live with the results. You cannot make plays based on how you think it's going to turn out, because you'll be second-guessing yourself all night long. I am so glad. I am so forever grateful that this came out, because it puts the rest. Because Skip Bayless has been telling people for 15 years, Michael told Steve Kerr he was going to pass him the ball, and that's why he did that. No, what I saw in Game 5 against the Lakers in '91, it was Phil Jackson. Michael, because he didn't call him Mike. He called him Michael. Who's open? And he over on the sideline with his head down. John, get him the ball. We've got to get that guy the ball. Move the ball. Huh. What? Skip, did you hear that too? Because I don't know. If you didn't hear it, I got my guy on Roy on standby. I told him Skip Bayless might need a TV. And he says he has a 55-inch or an LED waiting for you. All I got to do is give him the green light. So if your TV wasn't working and you couldn't hear and see what was transpiring last night, I hit him on the phone and he'll be there by noon today. Just let me know.
I hope you're finished, because I'm about to unleash on every last word you just said. Yes, you're right. That was Game 5, which became the closeout game of the Showtime Lakers. The Bulls were up 3-1 because of Michael Jeffrey Jordan on his way to becoming the MVP of that, his first NBA Finals victory and first MVP, and he went 6 for 6 in that category. So the point was, they did lose Game 1 back at Old Chicago Stadium. I was there for the first game. I was sitting at courtside, so I know what happened. Sam Perkins made a big three, and it was a big upset. But you could see all day long that the Bulls were just better, because Jordan was by far the best player on the floor. He absolutely destroyed the Lakers and their confidence in Game 2, and then in Game 3, and then in Game 4, and now we came to Game 5. I was also there at courtside. I wasn't in the forum. You couldn't sit courtside if you were in the media. You had to sit about halfway up. But I was right behind Chick Hearn, the great Lakers broadcaster, and I watched what was happening, Shannon Sharpe. The Lakers were triple-teaming Michael Jordan because they knew they didn't have a prayer unless they just sold out on defense and said, everybody attack Jordan, just the way the Pistons had tried to attack Michael Jordan. And early in the game, we're not talking about for the last shot, we're talking about in the first quarter, we got to see the video of Phil saying, Michael, who's going to be open? John. Well, obviously, they were not guarding John Paxson, who was a very good shooter, very good stand-still, catch-and-shoot jump shooter. And so Michael said, okay, I'll give it a try. And John made his first jumper. And then he said, okay, I'll give it another try. And he made his second one. And Michael said, okay, he's got a hot hand. I'll feed him. And they tripled Michael, and he kept feeding John Paxson. They weren't three-point shots. They were two-point jump shots. I'm talking about wide open, 18-foot, oh, you're really going to let me have this kind of jump shots. And he kept catching it, going up, and shooting the equivalent of free throws. And he made 9 of them, and he scored 20 points. And it was the difference in a game that wound up 108-101 Bulls. It wasn't even really close. It was, in the end, they just pulled away pretty easily because Jordan scored 30 and Paxson scored 20. So I have no idea why you're trying to make such a big deal out of that. And my biggest takeaway, to your point, was I still haven't gotten over the fact that a guy I know very well, in fact, I consider Doug Collins a friend of mine, and when he coached Michael for those first 3 years after Stan Albeck, his whole idea was, I've got the best player on the planet. The classic, the money quote last night was my man sitting there saying, Doug Collins saying, gee, do you realize I'm coaching a guy who's the MVP of the league? He's the MVP of the All-Star game. He's the defensive player of the year. And he's the slam dunk champ twice in a row. And Doug is saying, what am I supposed to do? I'm just going to get him the basketball, and I want everybody else to get out of the way. And that's what was happening. And if Michael had grown up under Doug and gotten to the point where the great Tim Grover, his trainer, had said, we need to put on 15 pounds of muscle, I believe Doug Collins could have coached Michael and the Bulls to at least as much success as Phil Jackson did. Phil's got a little bit of snakery in him, too. So he realized that if he bonded with Tex Winter and he kissed up to Jerry Krause, maybe he could sort of snake the job out from under Doug Collins. And he did. And he went on to install the triangle, which is a bunch of hocus pocus. In the end, all those Bulls team, when it came push to shove, there's no triangle. The triangle is the devil's triangle. It's Michael Jordan. It's like, give him the ball and you guys are done. You're dead because he's going to score it every time. And all I got to leave you with is this. Under Phil Jackson, what happened in the very last game that Michael Jordan played as a Chicago Bull? It was Game 6 at Utah. He scored 45 points. The rest of the team scored 42 points. Scotty scored 8. And Scotty was wide open on the wing for the last shot of the game. I'm open. I'm open. And Michael gives him one little glance like, stop it. And he goes up and holds the pose on Brian Russell, and you know the rest of the story. That team it started with Michael Jordan, and it ended with Michael Jordan, so I appreciate you bringing all that up.
Skip, I'm not so sure, Skip, had Michael remained a solo act, they would have won the title, Skip, because the other players all of a sudden started to feel like they were involved once Phil came along. You hear them talk about how Scotty went to the next level. Other guys started contributing more because Michael had no choice, because Phil was forcing Michael, you've got to trust these guys. And if you don't trust them when you need them, they're not going to be able to be there for you. So he had to develop a trust. Now, I think he always had somewhat of a trust in Scotty because he saw Scotty the way Scotty was in practice. Scotty could guard all the positions. He made it, obviously, Skip, because he was equal to Michael. He was a little taller and a little longer. So he and Scotty playing passing lanes, man, it was hard to get the ball up the court. Skip, you remember in Game 1, in which the Lakers won that game, is that Magic had a triple-double. Then they put Scotty on it. Scotty was picking up Magic Johnson, no question about it, the greatest point guard of all time, 94 feet. What player you know, Skip, is going to pick up another player? Ain't nobody picking up James Harden 94 feet. Ain't nobody picking up Steph Curry for an entire game and for the remainder of the series, 94 feet. But that's what Scotty did. And that really changed the series, Skip. And when you look at it, yes, Michael, 88, 89, and 90. They got beat by the Pistons. And guess what happened, Skip? They lost 4-1 in the second round, and Michael had all those accolades. He was regular season MVP, All-Star Game MVP, dunk champion, defensive player of the year, and spanked him. Put him right over his leg and spanked him. Got him right on up out the playoffs. So in other words, because what you do here is that when Mike Miller have an outstanding game, oh, Mike Miller had 20 points. Look at what Mike did. LeBron James was an afterthought. Mario Chambers had 22 points. LeBron James was an afterthought. And lo and behold, all the all-time great players have teammates. And you ask your teammates sometimes to do their job. Well, John Paxson was the starting point guard on that team for those wins. That's what he was, wasn't he, Skip Bayless? John Paxson was the starting point guard on those teams. He was a damn good player. Skip, I'm not saying he was a Hall of Famer. I'm not saying he was an all-star. But he was very good for what they asked him to do. And there are a lot of teams that's like that you have to have a guy that, although he's not heralded, he's not going to be an all-NBA or all-star, but he holds it together. And that's what John Paxson, because not only did he do Game 5, Skip, you remember what he did when Horace Grant passed in that ball, right, Skip Bayless? You remember, right? You remember what he did, Skip, right? You remember that game when he shot? Don't pretend you don't remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I was there in 98 for every game, so I do know what happened. I covered the Bulls in 98 for the Chicago Tribune. John Paxson wasn't the point guard. He was just a shooter. That's all he was. He was an extra body. He was
Skip.
Kerr
Early.
To me. They were interchangeable.
Early.
Yeah, I got it, but he was not the point guard.
Like the 91 to 93.
Yeah, okay. I know, I'm with you. So the point was that Michael ended up being the point guard, and Michael was the best defender on that team. And I know Scotty could play point forward, and I give you, Scotty took Magic in the finals just because of the matchups. It worked. But if you had asked Michael to take Magic, Michael would have taken him out of the series just the same way. It just worked out.
He did take
Scotty, who was a very good defender. No, trust me on this. If they had needed Michael to neutralize Magic, he would have neutralized him. And the point was that Scotty did give them a second defender, but he was not better than Michael. Michael was the defensive player of the year. Scotty was never a defensive player of the year. Now, let's look at the bigger picture of what Michael did for that franchise. Last night was a lot about the Pistons and about Dennis Rodman. Rodman was obviously a Piston for a while and was just haunted the Bulls as a physical presence. And then Jordan welcomed him, as did Phil, onto the Bulls. And yet, it wasn't Phil who coached Rodman. It was Michael who kept him in bounds. And again, the big story that I knew, so none of this was shocking to me, but the nation got to see it last night, was that at one point, 97, 98, after Scotty came back from his off-season surgery, which he had just before the season, he missed almost like half the season, Dennis got a little upset. He felt like he'd fallen to the third wheel after he'd played very well for a stretch without Scotty. And he asked Phil, could I take a couple of days off and go to Vegas? So Phil asked Michael, which is interesting, will you sign off on this? And Michael didn't like it, but he said, if it's 48 hours, I'll accept it, but he won't be back in 48 hours. Well, he was, they didn't actually point out last night in the documentary, Dennis actually came back from Las Vegas in 48 hours. It wasn't that Michael had to fly to Vegas to get him. He actually had two apartments in Chicago, one near the Berto Center up in Deerfield where they practiced, and one near the United Center downtown. And Michael had to go to that apartment downtown and knock on the door because Dennis just didn't feel like yet coming back to the Bulls. And I believe there was a Carmen Electra sighting there. At least that's what she said.
Yes.
It was always something with Dennis. But it was up to Michael to keep Dennis in check, and he did, because Dennis Rodman was scared of Michael Jordan. So when Michael came down hard on Dennis, Dennis took it from Michael in ways he wouldn't take it from Phil or from anybody who ever coached him back to southeastern Oklahoma. So it was magical what Michael did with Dennis through that run and those three championships the second half of his run in Chicago.
Well, Skip, let me tell you how Michael neutralized Magic in the first game. He neutralized Magic so much in the first game, Magic put a triple-double on him, and the Lakers won the game, which was the only game they won. And from that point on, Phil put Scottie Pippen on Magic Johnson, and we know the outcome. Second, Skip, Dennis Rodman out of his mind. Skip, you covered football a lot longer than you covered basketball. You know there's no way in hell that a player can go to a head coach and say, man, I need a vacation in the middle of the season. And say, man, I need me a vacation, man. Hey, I need 48 hours. I need something. Man, that coach will say, man, if you don't get your you-know-what out my office, Skip Bayless, there is no way in hell. I don't care who, I don't care how player-friendly he is, and I don't care who the player is. You're not getting Skip, you're not getting a vacation during the season. Dennis Rodman went to the Bulls, went to Phil. But Skip, I love how Phil did it. Phil said, Michael, Dennis got something he want to tell you. He's like, Phil said, I'm not telling Michael. I'm going to bring Michael in this office, and you go tell him. And Dennis said, hey, bro, I need a vacation. And Mike already knew. Say, if we let him go, he ain't coming back. And the second of all, Skip, and I know you noticed this too, Michael Jordan has not forgiven the Pistons and Isaiah Thomas because he believes it was Isaiah. Now, Isaiah said it was Bill Laimbeer says we ain't shaking them you-know-what's hands. Michael Jordan believes it was Isaiah. He says, Isaiah, you're the leader of that team. You should have known better. Because, Skip, you remember years before, the Boston Celtics did the exact same thing to the Pistons. And I remember it like it was yesterday. They walked off the court. Now, I didn't remember this little minute detail that Aguirre was getting ready to shoot free throws, and all of them emptied. I remember DJ, Bird, Parrish, all of them left. Isaiah ran and grabbed Kevin McHale.
He did.
Nobody shook hands. And so Isaiah thought that was the way you did it. But even though, and I don't, look, I have I just believe Isaiah should have taken the high road. But to this day, Michael Jordan has not forgiven the Pistons, mainly Isaiah, because he says you as the leader. But to Michael's credit, Skip, when they bust his head every 3 years, Skip, he shook everybody's hand. He even did an interview on the court after he lost. Who does that?
He did.
Find a guy right now losing the conference finals or losing the NBA finals that's willing to give you an interview after they lose on the court. The greatest player at that time did that. So he's like, hold on. I got my butt kicked 3 years in a row. I was mad enough to shake everybody's hand. Now we return the favor, and y'all gonna weasel out of here. You heard what Horace Grant said. Horace Grant said they acted like some straight-up bees. Some straight-up bees, that's what they were. And we like, good, go ahead. We kicked your ass.
I agree.
But Skip, listen to Michael talk, Skip, and you listen at his body language and his demeanor, he ain't forgot that. He'll never forgive Isaiah. He'll never forgive Isaiah. And that's one of the reasons you and I both know, Skip, Isaiah Thomas should have been on that dream team. And he wasn't for one simple reason, what transpired before the 91 championship. That's it. No other reason.
Yep. I agree with that. I'll also try to be fair about this before I launch and say that a couple of days before that closeout game of that sweep, Michael had made some comments about the Pistons, the bad boys, were not worthy champions, that they were bad champions because of the way they carried themselves. And remember, they all admitted, we tried to hurt Michael Jordan. Dennis Rodman just flat out says in the documentary that we tried to physically hurt Michael Jordan. And John Sally, who I know very well, said, you have to get him, you have to hit him before he takes flight because, you know, he's not human. Well, that's what they thought. He's not human. And Isaiah feared him, but obviously signed off on playing football against him because that was the only way they could stop him. And the rules allowed then for you to play football. The superstars were not protected in those days. There was no such thing as flopping and trying to draw a call like we see now. There was no fraternizing then quite the way it is now, where everybody's one big happy family. This was blood. And when you challenge Michael like that, when you beat the hell out of him, he's not going to like it and he's not going to get over it. And here's the point. Isaiah never got over it either, because we've had Isaiah on our show. I don't know if you remember this. I think the last time was in 2016, ahead of the NBA Finals in Oakland. We had Isaiah on, and he is hard on Michael. He takes shots to this day at Michael, and Michael doesn't like that. And so Michael just flat out called him a, you know what, I can't say the word, it starts with A. And that's what Michael thinks of him. And again, I never got over the fact that the Pistons walked off the floor right in front of Jordan. But I thought it was incredibly humiliating, even to the Pistons, to have to parade off right past Michael Jordan. In a way, it was showing, in a weird way, sort of upside down respect to him, because they were afraid of him. And so they tried to disrespect him by not shaking his hand. But in the end, they were saying to him, yeah, you got us, and we can't stand it. He knew he got them. He got them once and for all. That was the beginning of the end of the Pistons as we knew them. And yet, he's right. What he said last night, it's just not sportsmanship. You should go shake the other guy's hand. If he beats you straight up, and they got beaten badly. They got beaten straight up, no bad calls, no fluky plays. They got their butts kicked by Michael Jordan and company, and they should have shaken his hand.
Oh, they should have, huh? So make sure you tell Tom Brady that next time you lose a Super Bowl to go over there and shake the opposing quarterback's hand. You make sure you do that, Skip Bayless. I'm glad you said that. I wasn't going to bring that up because you know he's notorious for that, Skip Bayless. But you know what happened, Skip? The Pistons learned that from the Celtics, because what did the Celtics do to beat the Lakers? They bullied them. And you remember, Skip, it was the Pistons that turned around and bullied the Celtics and beat them. They snatched Bird out of the air. They knocked Parrish and McHale upside their head. So they says, this is the way we can. It was an ugly brand of basketball. And the NBA really didn't like that. And so they were glad when the Bulls beat the Pistons, Skip, because they love the Celtics. They love Larry Bird. But when the Pistons knocked the Celtics out with the style of brand of ball they played, the NBA was like, man, we can't wait for somebody to get you guys up out of here.
Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here to get the latest from the show, and be sure to check out more of the best clips from Undisputed, or go watch a few other segments from our other shows on FS1.